In this lecture, we'll be setting up the IK rig for our other leg and getting it ready for animation. Okay, so here's where we got up to last time, and I'm going to start working on my IK leg rig. So I'll hide the forward kinematics one, or the FK, and make my IK visible. Now at the moment, I can't select my IK rig. That's because I'm actually still in pose mode for my FK. So just be careful of that. If I press Control Tab now, I can jump back to object mode without having to make it visible. But just be aware if you can't select your IK rig, that might be why. Now I can select my IK rig, go to side view, and I'm ready to set up the IK. Do remember to turn your record button off as well. So pause the video and quickly catch up with me, making sure you're ready to rig our IK leg. Okay, the interesting thing with IK is that you can set it up with a rigged object. So we've already attached these objects to the armature, but we can still go ahead with the IK. It's worth noting, however, that most people will set up IK first before attaching the objects to the rig. Now to make this work, we need an actual controller down the bottom here. So I'll start by doing that. So into edit mode, select this bottom mode here, E to extrude in the Y, and pull that out. Now you don't need to follow along with me, but if I go into pose mode now, so Control Tab, pose mode, select that bone and press G to grab, it's only rotating because obviously it's a child of this bone. So we can't move it. We need to be able to move it so we can use it as a controller. So we actually need to disconnect this bone from this one. So back into edit mode, Alt P to clear parent and clear parent. So this is now a separate bone. If I go back to pose mode, press G to grab, we can move it independently. And that's important. I'll just quickly go back to edit mode and rename it. So F2, and I'll just call it target. So that's the target bone used to control our IK. Now to set up IK, you need to actually be in pose mode. That seems unintuitive. It sort of makes sense because we've kind of already rigged our character and this is controlling the rig, hence pose mode. That may help you remember. So we're going to go across into pose mode. So Control Tab, into pose mode. Now the bone that has the IK on is the end of the chain that we want to control. So we want to control these two, not the foot. We're trying to control these two with this target. So we're selecting this bone here, the lower leg. Now we can go down to the bone constraints, add bone constraint, and inverse kinematics. Now this has a chain length of 2, so the upper leg and lower leg. We could type that into here, the chain length. I'll just open this box up so you can read the titles. But if you set it to 0, it will use the whole chain, which is 2 in this case. So it doesn't actually make any difference in this particular case. We'll talk more about that when we get our full character later on. But for now, we've got those 2 bones in the chain. We just need to set this bone as the target. Well, we've got a target option here. Now I've got the picker here, so I can use my picker or eyedropper and choose object armature 001. Do make sure you get the armature and not the other objects. If you're worried about that, then actually just click in the box and you've got lots of options here. We are armature 001, which you can see up here. I'll select that. And in fact, I'm going to rename this. So IK armature, just so we're absolutely sure. And you can see it changes down here. So the kind of strange thing is we are actually just choosing the armature and then we still have to choose the bone. It seems strange that we can't just select the bone, but we have to select the armature first and then which bone we want. So we're choosing target. So now if I select the target and press G to grab, you can see that we're controlling the bone from the other end. So inverse kinematics. I'll just right click to cancel that. And remember you can press Alt G to remove any movement. So now's a good time to catch up with me and add in your target bone and hook up the IK to the lower leg so we can use the target bone as our controller. Pause the video and have a go at that. The one slight problem we have here, if I go round to the front here and press G to grab and move it around, we have no way of controlling which way the knee is facing. I'll choose the top bone for now and press R then Z. What if I want to do this with my leg, so point the knee outwards? Well, I can't do that with these controls at the moment. So back into side view, we actually need a new bone coming out the front here. So back into edit mode, I'll select the tail here, E to extrude in the Y, pull that out there. And again, this needs to be separate so it can be out here and therefore be somewhere to point to. So Alt P, clear parent, and G to grab in the Y and move it out somewhere like here. Also, I'll rename this F2. I'll call this pole. So it's a pole target. So it's kind of like pointing towards the North Pole, like a compass sort of thing. That's one way to remember it. Okay, so back into pose mode, and I can select my bone where the IK constraint is attached to, and now there's an option for pole target. But once again, the dropper will only choose the armature. It's not going to choose the bone. We still have to select the bone ourselves. So I can choose this drop down and choose pole. Now instantly, it kind of flips around. It always does this. That's to do with the pole angle. And it's one of those things that I don't particularly understand and I've never been able to find any comprehensive answer to. But basically, it's always going to be divisible by 90. So in this case, minus 90 should line it up, and it does, yes. So just try minus 90. That will probably set it in place. If not, you can actually click and drag on it and kind of point it in the right direction like that. But I know in this case it's minus 90 and that's lined up nicely. I should be able to grab the pole now. So select it, G to grab, and we can point in that direction. So now's a good time to pause the video and catch up with me and set up the pole target. Okay, so we're almost there. There's just one last thing. If I try and squat down, so I've got my main bone here. If I press G to grab in the Z, I squat down. That's great. Our controller is controlling the rest of the chain and not letting it move any further. The problem is our ankle is rotating. I want it to stay flat on the floor. So the ankle bone here, or the foot and the toes, is still attached to this bone and therefore rotating with it. So I actually need to disconnect them from the bone. So back into edit mode, Alt P, clear parent. That's great. So if I go back to pose mode now, I know straight away that it's working because it's back to its default position, so not being affected by the lower leg. So I can move this around and it's not rotating my foot bone. That's fantastic. So let's get our controller and try and move. It's not attached though, so it's still not quite working. So it's good that it's not a child anymore and not affected by the rotation of this bone, but we still need to copy this location here somehow. Well, there's a constraint for that. So I can select this bone here that I want to copy the location of the end here, go to the constraints, add bone constraints, and copy location. Then I can choose the target. Again, it chooses the armature first, and then I can choose the bone, which is the lower leg bone. Okay, so we're almost there, but it's on the wrong end. Well, there's an easy option here. Do you want the head or the tail? And we can move it to the tail. So now I can move my body up and down, and it's already wanting to jump up and down. I'll press Alt-G to cancel any movement. And we've also got our target, our IK controller here, and we can move that around here. And we've also got our pole target, and we can move that around if we want to move the knee. So that's an IK setup. So hopefully that wasn't too complicated for you, and it kind of makes sense how and why we set the things up in the way we do. So of course, make sure you're caught up with me and you've set up your own IK leg, and try and remember the three aspects to it. You've got the controller at the base, you've got the pole, and you also have to disconnect the foot bone and copy the location of your lower leg bone. Once you've done that, you're ready for animating in the next lecture.